This Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS and Paramount Plus, 2:30 p.m. local time in the Central Time Zone, we have the 24th ranked 4-2, 2-1 in Big Ten Conference play Michigan Wolverines taking the road to Champaign, Illinois to play the 22nd ranked 5-1, also 2-1 in Big Ten Conference play, Illinois Fighting Illini. Something that is interesting about both of these teams is that the previous 3 weeks for the Wolverines and the Illini has been a combination of the three. A bye week, a double-digit loss, and a game where the Wolverines and the Illinois Fighting Illini led big at the half, double digits at the half, led by 3 scores actually at the half, and they nearly choked the lead away. Those games are the double-digit loss, Illinois versus Penn State, Washington versus Michigan, obviously their bye weeks, and then Michigan versus Minnesota was the near choke job disaster, and Illinois, I couldn't believe what I was watching, both in the highlight package and when I had the game on my smaller of my 2 TVs. It was unbelievable watching Purdue's backup quarterback sling it. Honestly, watching him kind of look like Drew Brees at times against, well, Illinois' defense, which hadn't given up anything close to the near 50 burger they surrendered, counting overtime, for the whole season. But I think that it being a rivalry game, Illinois probably looking ahead a little bit to Michigan, taking the foot off the gas a little bit. It was a combination of multiple things, and it was similar with Michigan's win versus Minnesota. But both of these teams have things to be very worried about, very concerned about. There are reasons for optimism for both teams, more so for Illinois, in my opinion, because they only have 1 loss. Their schedule is easier as they play Oregon, but they avoid Ohio State. They've already gotten Penn State out of the way. Michigan, well, they have 2 losses instead of 1, and they still have to face Oregon and the Buckeyes. But technically, and I strongly say technically here, both of these teams could maybe reach the college football playoff. Again, that favors more Illinois in terms of odds. And both of these teams, if they earn a win here, obviously both can earn a win, but the winner here is going to have a sense of rebound, not just for this season, but for their program as well. Illinois is coming off of a 5-7 season last year. A win here clinches bowl eligibility, and they'll probably earn a few more wins throughout their remaining schedule in the months of October and November. And they have a plethora of star players who we're going to talk about, and many of them have remaining eligibility. So this could be a game to build on for 2025. And as for Michigan, it's the same thing. Michigan has some star players that have remaining eligibility. Michigan is a blue blood program who is obviously having a bad year compared to the prior 3-year run that Harbaugh made, where Michigan won the Big Ten for 3 years in a row. And honestly, this is a year where you have to do what you can do. You have to avoid total disaster with 2 losses already, and with Ohio State and Oregon left on the schedule. A college football playoff appearance with this offense is unlikely, but a win here can allow Sharon Moore to tread water and give Michigan's administration, fan base, and locker room enough faith to keep fighting on for the rest of the season and invest into building back in 2025. But welcome back, everyone. It's College Football with Sam. We're going to talk about this game, and before we do so, I would really appreciate it if you can like the video, share it around, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. Also, comment your thoughts down below, and join our Discord server where we have a dedicated Illinois and Michigan thread. And we have dedicated threads really for all 18 Big Ten teams, as this is a Big Ten centered channel. So thank you very much. The Discord is totally free. You can just join that via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. And if you're not a fan of a Big Ten school, but you're just interested in my covering of the sport or Big Ten football, that's no problem, because we have other threads for other college football topics. We welcome all college football fans. After all, we pride ourselves on being the best Big Ten football channel on YouTube, but we want to be the best college football channel on YouTube, and you can help us do that by liking, sharing, subscribing, hitting the bell, commenting, sharing this video and channel around. And also, if you want to help monetarily, join our Patreon page or purchase from our merchandise store via the link in the description and down below in the pinned comment. But let's get right into this. As I said, these two teams are not world beaters. They are not great. They are not elite, near elite. I hope I didn't imply that in my introduction when I said they have a chance at reaching the playoff. Mathematically, Michigan does, but I think it's a similar situation to Ole Miss, where you have two losses this early and you haven't exactly looked good in the games that matter, or for Michigan's case, in any game. So mathematically you can, but it would take a miracle. And as for Illinois, they have a higher chance, but it's not that much better. They still have to play Oregon on the road in Autzen. That could be maybe a win because chaos exists, but is likely going to be a loss. And Illinois, as you can tell, is in a similar boat with Michigan per power ratings. Michigan's probably only ahead of Illinois due to season priors that models still factor in, which I think are becoming less and less relevant with the portal and NIL and just all the roster changes that happen year to year now that didn't used to occur. Michigan's viewed as only about a touchdown better than the average college football team in FPI and about 2 touchdowns better than the average college football team in SP+. 7.7 points for FPI, 13.7 for S&P+. You look at Illinois, they're viewed as about a field goal better than the average college football team in FPI, 3.2 points superior to the average team in FBS, and they're viewed as 6.3 points better than the average college football team in FPI, or per S&P+, rather. These teams are both fringe top 25, maybe barely top 25 if you look at Michigan's S&P+, and in the case of Illinois, per FPI, they're not even top 35. They're not. They collapsed after that Purdue game. FPI is very responsive to points, as you should be for the most part, but sometimes I think it fails to pick up on games that could be rather fluky, or it cares too much about point spreads. S&P Plus is more tempo adjusted. It is, and I like it more. However, I think S&P Plus may take priors more seriously. I don't know. Both power rating systems are different, and I like things about them, so that's why we're talking about them here. I do want to include my potential power index once that is up, and to see how it compares with these, and not just in accuracy of predicting games, which is the most important, but also just what it thinks on a week-to-week basis after the games are played. In points per play margin, these teams are also very similar. In fact, they're only 0.002 points different in points per play margin. Points per play margin means that for every play your team scores, take any team just out of a random draw, that team, what points per play margin means is how much more or less points per play does that specific team score compared to their average opponent. So for Illinois, take all 6 of their opponents and add how they performed against Illinois on a points per play basis and how Illinois did on a points per play basis against them, and you get points per play margin, basically. It's probably oversimplified. Maybe I missed something there. But Michigan and Illinois on an average basis, because their points per play margin numbers are positive, that typically indicates they win more games than they lose. An exception to this might be 2021 Nebraska, where you have a positive scoring margin. In fact, a somewhat significant positive scoring margin, but a losing record. Michigan and Illinois have won a lot of close games, and Michigan got blown up by Texas. Illinois got dominated by Penn State. Michigan lost to Washington. But at the end of the day, on an average basis, they score about 0.06 more points per play than their opponents does. With Michigan, the next integer, or not. Gosh, have I really forgotten what math terms are? Anyway, from the hundredths place to the thousandths place, I know that you put a 3, and then for Illinois, it's a 1. So a 0.063 points per play margin for Michigan, and 0.061 points per play margin for Illinois. That's what we have. So both teams that are similar in terms of dominance without adjusting for strength of schedule. That's another way to interpret points per play margin. And their strength of schedules are pretty different. Michigan has the 15th toughest strength of schedule. Illinois only has the 49th toughest strength of schedule. Michigan is 24th in game control, which means per ESPN's analytics, really their FPI, only 23 teams would do a better job with Michigan's schedule in terms of performance. As for Illinois, about 40 teams would do better than the Illinois Fighting Illini at controlling their own schedule. Game control is how well you perform in a game adjusted for strength of schedule, basically. But that's the bird's eye view. That's the viewing the forest things. And we're now going to get into viewing the trees and the little details. Viewing the forest for what it is, taking the big picture view is very important. We know now that these teams overall are similar. They are not elite. They're not near elite. They're not even great. Are they good? I would say so. Definitely above average or average, and they're not below average or bad. Maybe relative to expectations or what they should be, they are. And that's more on the Michigan side of things. But objectively, relative to the FBS, the average FBS team, these are above average good teams. You look at the matchups here, and I think the most important one is Michigan's defense against Illinois' passing offense. Illinois has had problems, whether it's against Purdue, whether it's against Kansas, whether it is against Penn State, whether in the first half, second half they were locked down, but first half in stopping Nebraska's rushing attack. And Nebraska, by the way, is only averaging 3.9 yards per carry. They do not have a good rushing offense. Teams have been able to run the ball on Illinois. They have. I think Michigan will be able to run the football on Illinois. But also, Illinois does have a good pass defense. And Michigan, even with a bye, they are not going to fix their passing offense. Michigan's offense and how it is going to approach teams is a known. The unknown here, and what will ultimately determine the game, is how Michigan's defense, specifically in stopping the pass, will fare against an Illinois passing offense that is electric. Luke Altmaier on the season has 1,426 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's playing at a completely different level than he was last season. And his leading receivers, Pat Bryant, who has 452 receiving yards, 7 receiving touchdowns on 27 receptions. Illinois is a really good football team when it comes to passing the football. And they have electric receivers, speedy receivers. You have Zachary Franklin, who is used in a variety of ways and is really good specifically at catching the football. We all know the catches he made against Nebraska and also, more importantly, against Kansas. Illinois will be able to pass the football on most teams they play. The question is, can Michigan slow down their passing offense? Can they do what they did against USC, against Miller Moss? Can they perform at that level? Or is Michigan's passing offense going to play as if it were facing Washington in round 2, giving up a lot of third and longs, letting a lot of big plays through the air finish? What are we going to see out of Michigan's defense, specifically in stopping the pass? Because you look at Michigan's pass defense, and it is bad. It is bad. All caps, starting with a capital, bold, and underlined B. Michigan, in pass defense this season, teams pass for 40 attempts per game on Michigan. A huge part of that is teams get down early on Michigan. They can't run on Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant. They can't run on the front. So then they just pass for the rest of the game, and they find success. Michigan does force 15.3 opponent incompletions per game, and opponents only complete around 62% of their passes on Michigan, which is bad, but not outside the top 100 bad. However, Michigan allows opponents to average 6.4 yards per pass attempt, which is 34th, 10.4 opponent yards per completion, which is 21st. Michigan only is 50th in sack percentage because teams pass so much on Michigan. They get the ball out quickly because Michigan's DBs have not taken very good angles in tackling this season. It's a pretty safe bet to throw a short pass and then rely on your receivers to get yards after contact or yards after catch against this Michigan defense, especially with the safety and linebacker play that they've had. And Illinois, I think, will exploit that. I mean, again, I gave you opponent completions per game, pass attempts per game. Those are outside the top 100. Michigan is outside the top 100 passing first downs per game. They're 101st in passing yards allowed per game. They're 51st in opponent average team passer rating, and they're outside of the top 20 in yards per completion and yards per pass attempt. I blame a lot of this on Wink Martindale and the position coaches. I think that if Michigan's defensive staff from last year was still around, that this may actually be the best defense in the country. And that's even more concerning, by the way, because scheme matters more than players, with maybe the exception of rare instances of teams winning national titles because their roster is so good they compensate for an inferior coach like Larry Coker or Ed Orgeron. Illinois' passing offense, then we'll get to talking about specific players, they are averaging right now, the Illini, 8.7 yards per pass attempt, which is 22nd, 13.2 yards per completion, which is 28th. They're 17th in average team passer rating with an average of 160.6. They only have 9.6 incompletions per game, which is 29th. And they are 30th in completion percentage, averaging 65.71% completion percentage. And keep in mind, all those stats that I'm giving you right now, just to avoid confusion, those are from teamrankings.com, a site that I data scrape because it gives you all different types of statistics, over 100 of them, as it relates to college football. They do not track stats against FCS opponents, though. So Illinois' performance against Eastern Illinois is left out of those statistics, and a lot of the player statistics that I will give you are from ESPN, and they count the FCS statistics, which I think, honestly, unless you're a bad team who beats upon the FCS but can't take it at the FBS, I don't really see a problem with counting FCS stats. But I understand why teamrankings.com doesn't do it, because, well, it can kind of skew the numbers at times. If you get up big on these smaller schools and then in real games against opponents who can test you, you get destroyed, or you don't do that much. But speaking of these offenses, really specifically Illinois' passing offense, I think Illinois is better at quarterback. They're much better at wide receiver and also much better at quarterback compared to Michigan. Michigan, I think, is better at running back, slightly better at tight end, and on the offensive line, I'd actually say they're much better. Illinois has not done a good job this season at protecting Luke Altmaier. They have struggled to run the football all season long. For example, they're only averaging 3.9 yards per carry. Their two leading running backs, Fagan and McCray, are only averaging 4.6 and 4.4 yards per carry, respectively. And the best defense they played by a mile was Penn State and also Nebraska. Nebraska, I think, also has an elite defense. But Nebraska's defense didn't... Some of it may just be the amazing game plan by Barry Lunan Jr. and Brett Bielema. I don't think their defense played their A game against Illinois on that Friday night. And against Penn State, well, Illinois' offense got splattered in just about every way. Illinois has already given up 19 sacks on the season. And Luke Altmaier, again, 1,426 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, a pick, a 167.7 passer rating. Fagan has 306 rushing yards. McCray is 181. Lowry, bless me, has 145. And Khalil Valentine is 109. McCray and Fagan both have 3 rushing touchdowns. Altmaier also has 90 rushing yards, and that's factoring in the 19 sacks that he's received. And he has a rushing touchdown. On the receiving end of things, Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin, Colin Dixon, and Hank Beatty, they have 100 receiving yards each or more. Pat Bryant has 7 receiving touchdowns. Franklin has 1. Bryant has 452 receiving yards. Franklin has 346. Tanner Arkin has 2 receiving touchdowns. And other players that have at least 1 receiving touchdown are Malik Elzy, Josh McCray, Carson Goda, and Brandon Henderson, the offensive lineman who caught a touchdown pass on 4th and 2 against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. That's an overlook at this offense. Michigan is much better along the offensive line, even with some of the struggles that they have had. You look here at Miles Hinton, Josh Preeb, Dominic Judice, who will probably be replaced by Greg Crippen in this game, Giovanni El-Hadi, and then Evan Link. It's considered that, I forget if it's Percy or Gentry or what exactly is going on for Michigan's offensive line, but I hear there may be changes that are made. Regardless, this room has a lot of depth, and they're really good at running the football. They're getting better at pass protection as the season goes on. They're really getting better everywhere as the season goes on because it is a group that is young in terms of snaps. You look at Illinois, J.C. Davis and Melvin Priestley have had some good moments. This line is better than the 2023 offensive line. Josh Geske, Josh Kurtz, Zy Chrysler make up a experienced interior offensive line, but it's not a Big Ten championship caliber offensive line. It isn't. And I think that's been part of what's impressive about Illinois' offense is they are able to do things in really a non-conventional way for Big Ten teams, and they're kind of formulating their own identity, and they're having success with it through their passing game. Luke Altmaier, Zachary Franklin, Tanner Arkin, and also Pat Bryant. You look at Michigan, Jack Tuttle will probably start for the Wolverines, had 98 passing yards on 18 attempts against Washington, a touchdown, a pick, a 108.5 passer rating. Not a good game against Washington, not even close to the quarterback Luke Altmaier is, but a better passer than both Davis Warren and Alex Orji. Running the football, Donovan Edwards and Kalel Mullings, and also quarterback Alex Orji each have over 100 rushing yards. Mullings has 589 rushing yards, averaging 6.5 yards per carry. He has 6 rushing touchdowns. Donovan Edwards has 353 rushing yards, 4.8 yards per carry, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Michigan on the season's averaging 5.1 yards per carry with 9 rushing touchdowns. Colston Loveland is the only Michigan receiver who has over 100 receiving yards with 261, averaging 9 yards. 9 yards per reception with 2 receiving touchdowns. Michigan only has 6 receiving touchdowns on the season, and they're averaging a painfully low 8.5. You hear that? 8.5 yards per completion. They are 133rd in yards per completion and 132nd in yards per pass attempt. Michigan does not have a passing offense. Their next leading receiver, Samaj Morgan with 78 receiving yards, and there's Marlon Klein with 75 receiving yards coming in at third. Michigan's passing offense has been nothing short of a disaster. Nothing short of it. In fact, a disaster might be too kind to Michigan's passing offense. And Michigan's defense as well has had some disappointing moments too, but so has Illinois. I was watching Illinois against Purdue, and I do get the feeling that there was a little bit of, okay, this game's over, let's just pack it up and get out of here. But at the same time, from the get-go, from the beginning, Purdue was able to run the ball successfully on Illinois, and Purdue's quarterback, who backup, Brown, last name of Brown, was it Max Brown? Or I forget exactly. Oh yeah, Ryan Brown. He was doing well early in the game, but Purdue had a 4th down that they failed to convert. They had to settle for 3. That helped Illinois really get ahead of things when maybe the success rate, at least from what my eyes could tell, was closer in the first half than the score. Purdue was able to score 40 points in the second half to Illinois' 19. They roared all the way back in overtime. Purdue and Illinois both scored a touchdown, but Purdue tried to get the 2-point conversion to win. And despite the fact that there was an open receiver that would have won Purdue the game, Ryan Brown, being a young player, didn't see it. Illinois, to their credit, got immediate pressure. They survived and they escaped. Both of these defenses are good. In fact, they may be great. More for Michigan in that regard. They are not elite, and they're not near elite. Michigan's could be if they had better coaching. More on who I favor in the coaching department in a few minutes. And as for Illinois, I think there's some talent limitations, especially on the defensive line. But also I do think that, Aaron Henry, his defense has improved, and I do think that he is a good defensive coordinator, but I don't think he's what Ryan Walters was at Illinois yet either. And I still think that, well, this is his first defensive coordinator job, at a power school, and I think he's still learning some things. And also, the Big Ten isn't used to defending mobile quarterbacks. I think that's pretty obvious. Brown had 118 rushing yards, averaging 7 yards per carry, and his long was 20. So he was consistently getting yards and yards and yards on the ground. Just wasn't one long run, and then he didn't get sacked. He had several moments where he extended drives and picked up a first down. Tuttle could do that maybe occasionally. Orji could definitely do that. It'll be interesting to see how Michigan tries to attack this Illinois defense. As for Michigan's defense, though, you know that Illinois is going to attack them through the air. And the reason for that, again, is the matchup that I described to you. Michigan is allowing opponents to pass on them at will. They're outside the top 100 in passing first downs per game, passing yards per game, opponent attempts, opponent completions, opponent pass play percentage. Teams pass on Michigan for over 60% of the time. Crazy. And Michigan is third in opponent passing yards percentage. That over 75%, 77% specifically of Michigan's opponent yards are through the air. That's because Michigan also has a pretty good rushing defense. Michigan is sixth in opponent yards per rush attempt. They are third in rushing first downs per game, fourth in rushing yards per game, third in rushing attempts per game. People don't run on Michigan all that much because A, they have an elite defensive line. B, it's not worth it with some of the holes that Michigan has in the secondary. I would give Michigan the edge on the defensive line, at corner, with Will Johnson and also Yair Hill, who've both done a pretty good job overall. I'd give Illinois linebacker, though, and safety, which are some of the areas where Michigan has especially struggled. Michigan's defense this season's earned 17 sacks, 6 interceptions, 27 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. Illinois' defense has earned 14 sacks, 7 interceptions, 15 passes defended, 7 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries. Illinois is much better at Michigan when you look at turnovers. When you look at turnover margin per game, Illinois is flat. They're 63rd, 0. Michigan, on average, has a -1 turnover margin per game, negative 0.7 to be exact. That's 107th. They give the ball away on average 2 times per game. Illinois only gives it away on average 1.2 times per game. And Illinois has also only thrown 1 interception. Michigan, to this date, has thrown more interceptions than passing touchdowns. So, yikes. Turnovers favor Illinois, and I think Illinois is the more balanced team, clearly, on offense at least. Defensively, both have their strengths, both have their weaknesses. I really like for Illinois that safety duo of Miles Scott, Xavier Scott. It's actually a safety trio. Xavier Scott, Miles Scott, Matthew Bailey. Xavier Scott is nickelback, but more of a safety than a corner. I like Torrey Cox Jr. and Caleb Patterson at corner. Illinois does have a much better secondary than defensive front, but Dylan Rosiak, Josh Kruitz, and Seth Coleman make up a good group of linebackers, along with Gabe Jacas and Alex Bray, Tayra Edwards, who was a veteran from last year's team, and Dennis Briggs Jr. make up a good 3-man defensive front in the multiple 3-4 that Aaron Henry runs. As for Michigan defensively, I think that, look, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, Cameron Brandt, TJ Guy, the D-line's done a lot of what's been asked of them. No, Michigan is not sacking people left and right, but they weren't exactly doing that last year either. And I think a lot of that has more so to do with scheme this season with some of the drop back and pass rush than anything else. And you look at linebacker, you look at secondary, those areas lost more than the defensive line. And I think an indicator of some of the struggles that Michigan has at coaching are the fact that Michigan returned a lot on the D-line in terms of 2-deep. So there wasn't that much of a drop-off because they were already developed and coordinated by elite coaches. Linebacker, not exactly so much, at least for a long time. And the same goes with a lot of the secondary, where Yair Hill is a redshirt freshman, Zeke Berry's a redshirt sophomore, and I think with Wink Martindale's scheme, that 4-2-5 that he runs, base defense of the Ravens style, it's not very creative. It's way too blitz happy. Really, looking at these defenses, what's fascinating is how they're going to be utilized and what style of defense is going to come out on top against offenses that honestly couldn't be different, with Michigan's being elite near elite in running the football, Illinois being great near elite in passing, Michigan having a non-existent passing offense, and Illinois just having maybe a below average rushing offense. In the trenches, I think Michigan's better. I think clearly than Illinois. Better O-line, way better O-line, way better D-line. Special teams is about equal. I think both of these teams have top 10 special teams units. Really, really good kickers. For Michigan, Dominic Zavada has been an underrated weapon. 8 field goals made on 8 attempts. The only reason he doesn't have more is Michigan's offense struggles to get inside their opponent's 50. And he's 15 of 16 on extra points. He's 4 of 4 from field goals of 50 plus. And as for Illinois, kicker David Alano's having a pretty good year. 10 of 12 on field goals, 1 of 2 from 50 plus, 21 of 21 on extra points. Really accurate, very reliable. I love both of these special teams units, and I think both will be featured in this game. As for coaching, I think Michigan still has a pretty good strength and conditioning staff. They are suffering more injuries, but that's because they lost a ton from last year, didn't use the portal all that much, and as a result, which is on the coaches, by the way, they can't rotate as much as they want to. They don't have the same depth. Guys are getting more tired, and since they don't have as good of players starting on an average basis, they're not putting opponents away. So, along with the fact they're playing tougher opponents earlier in the schedule, part of me kind of, isn't all that surprised that Michigan has suffered some injuries. I still think they're very good at strength and conditioning. Are they as good as they were under Ben Herbert? I don't exactly know because of all the other changes that have been made. Long term, if the current staff stays long term, we'll probably figure out, but given how good Ben Herbert was, I wouldn't exactly lean toward yes to answer that question. Illinois is better, though, at coaching. They're much better. You watch how they put their players in a position to win, compared to how Michigan's almost tries to fit their players into a peg size that doesn't fit their players. Yikes. Brett Bielema is more experienced than Sharon Moore. So far this season, he has managed games better, in my opinion, and the coordinators have done a much better job at Illinois in particular than at Michigan. Kirk Campbell and Wink Martindale are some of the worst coordinators in the Big Ten. Aaron Henry and Barry Looney Jr., while I wouldn't say that they're some of the best, they're certainly, I think, in that top half of Big Ten coordinators, given how their team is performing so far this season. So the coaching edge overall goes to Illinois. I'm ultimately picking Illinois to win. I'm picking them to cover. I think that they were in part looking ahead to Michigan during the Purdue game. I know Michigan's coming off of a bye, but you have to be good at coaching to really take advantage of a bye, and it could serve as a mental reset for the players. It sounds like Michigan will be healthy, but it's a road environment. Illinois is going to be stoked for this game. Illinois is an underdog, by the way, and sharps are on Michigan. The line opened up at Michigan -1. It's at Michigan -3 right now, and I honestly don't know why, because the matchup in this game, both teams have critical matchups on each other. Michigan, I know conventional wisdom honestly says Michigan will win this game. I'll put that out there right now. Conventional wisdom says Michigan, better rush offense, better run defense. They're much better in the trenches. That matters everywhere, but especially in the Big Ten, they should win this game. The problem is Michigan's staff, I think, is proven that they're incompetent in a variety of ways. They've been exposed all season long. You know how Ohio State staff was exposed a little bit, but it was only one game, so we don't know how, if their staff is actually overrated or if it was just a bad game. Michigan's had that Ohio State-Oregon moment multiple times this year. It's proven that their staff does not know how to put their players in a position to win. Illinois is the more balanced team on both sides of the football. No, they do not have the same upside Michigan does on offense running the ball or defense in terms of raw talent or run defense, but they're more balanced. And I think that a better game plan with a more balanced team with home field advantage, by the way, is going to be enough to win in a close game against an opponent that conventional wisdom says is going to win due to their trench dominance. And ultimately, who knows? Because, again, with the coaching situation at Michigan, but also with the fact that Illinois has played in a lot of close games this year, I can see this game going anyway. But I have Illinois winning and covering 30-24. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Honolulu OH for sponsoring this video and channel as Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lane, Ismar, Tyler Knight, Jilton Cush for being All-American members. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus for being All-Conference members. Check out my Patreon page, merchandise store, and Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Have a great day, everyone. Go Illini, and go Blue.